Come on now. There we go. Oh, and Eric heard on Facebook. What's going on there? Well, let's get our Facebook folks in here. We'll try again on the X side of things. That's okay. To go live. We got the wheels spinning on that one. Facebook's good. Maybe it won't be X today. That'd be okay. Maybe we'll let Dylan work on that in the background if it doesn't work here. Well, let's get the show rolling, folks. Appreciate everyone joining in. It is Wednesday morning, the 2nd of April, and we got a fun show today. We got a special guest on here, one of my favorite defensive minds on the social media side of things, and working on his Substack, and an author of many great defensive scheme books, Cody Alexander. It's Broncos for Breakfast. I'm Nick Kendall, joined by Eric Trickle, and good morning to you, Cody. Thank you so much for joining us bright and early. I think you're down in Texas, right? It's not like crazy too early for you down there.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Again, Cody has a lot of awesome areas. You can check out his Substack at Match Quarters. Go to Amazon.com if you want to brush up on your defensive philosophy and team building and scheme stuff there. What's the latest and greatest you're working on, Cody, right now?
Yeah, just really trying to build out the Substack. This kind of off season, I'm going back through kind of in reverse order of defenses, this year. So I'm watching the Raiders right now, but I'll have things coming out here in the next month or so.
Well, I apologize for that. Hopefully we can give you a little bit of a palate cleansing talking about this Bronco. I appreciate what Graham does out there. They've done a lot with little, maybe not the best grocery ingredients there, but the scheme has been good with Graham. I appreciate what he can do. I'm a little bummed that he's back, unfortunately. Yes. But Denver Broncos defense, I mean, gosh, everybody wants to talk Bo Nix, adding offensive weapons, everything like that. Of course, it's quarterback. It's Sean Payton. Team's been so deprived of offensive output for, over a decade now. Like 2015 was the start of the deprivation in Broncos country. But really the straw that stirs the drink for this team the past few seasons, and this offseason and going forward last year, has been the defense. Before we even, get into where the team is going and everything they added, I want your thoughts on what we saw last season. I mean, the turnaround from Vance Joseph's defense. We had you on, I think, a year ago when the defense was horrific from the Miami Dolphins game, even the Bears game, and then to turn around and have one of the top 3 to 5 defenses in football last season. I mean, what did you see as the key catalyst of what turned around this defense from a can't tackle, giving up 70 points to one of the strengths of the entire league?
Well, I think he really leaned into who he is. And by he, I mean Vance Joseph. I think we talked about it last year about he was trying to run the Fangio scheme, trying to fit it in with his language. Then they kind of made that switch to, hey, let's play more of my style. They kind of got a little bit better. Even then, though, they were playing a lot of soft cover 3. I mean, people probably don't want to remember, but Surtain did not play really well last year. So and then you could tell like a lot of it was very much passive in coverage. He wanted to play man, but he couldn't play man. A lot of it had to do with what was on the field. And then you go fast forward to this year and you could tell like it was just like, no, we're going to run my system. We're going to be really aggressive. The one thing that I think that Joseph did that is different than what he had done before, and then really what is kind of the standard in the NFL, was he decided, I'm going to pressure on first downs. We're going to start getting after offenses on first downs, which is something that kind of has proven with Brian Flores in the Vikings as something that can actually work and be sustainable in the NFL. And so I think if you look at like what the Vikings were doing versus what the Denver's doing, they were different things, but the one commonality in that is just getting after people on first down, and then obviously leaning into man coverage, which I think it kind of amplifies everything that he was trying to do on defense.
Yeah, so you mentioned Patrick Surtain and, being able to generate this pressure. How much is having a guy like Patrick Surtain on the back end able to help you generate that pressure up front by, blitzing, bringing extra guys, as well as the addition of a guy like John Franklin Myers to that defensive line?
Yeah, so the one thing that a lot of people need to understand is that the front is actually what's going to dictate how well the coverage is. Now, it's going to set your floor. The ceiling is obviously going to be the talent that you have on the back end. So your floor and how high that floor is going to be set by can you generate pressure? And so what you saw with the Broncos and a guy like Surtain is when you have somebody who can just X out one side of the field, it allows you to do some other things with the safeties. It allows you to maybe be a little bit more pressure heavy because you can void some zones or some areas in the field where they are, because you don't have to worry about that. Ask any defensive coordinator at any level of football, if you have a boundary corner, meaning somebody that plays opposite the passing strength, typically to the single receiver side, if you have a boundary corner, that alleviates a lot of pressure. Then you go to somebody like, Franklin Myers, who doesn't necessarily generate a ton of pressure. Allen was really the one that was generating a lot of that pressure. But what you get with somebody like that is he is sustaining blocks, right? He is forcing people to work to him. He's basically, hey, you have to double team me. What that does, and especially with the 5-man front that the Broncos really leaned into, was that you are creating one-on-ones. And when you have two edge rushers like Benito and Cooper that are super extremely athletic and fast, you are now putting a ton of pressure on those tackles because they're constantly in one-on-one matchups. So it's basically twofold. You're winning one-on-ones up front, and then you're winning your one-on-one that you need to win in the back end.
Yeah, I mean, Surtain was incredible last season. Obviously, with the Defensive Player of the Year, no edge rusher on a winning team stepped up. So Surtain, great to see him get that accolade. Well deserved, of course. I think if Parsons maybe played the whole season and the Cowboys a little better, we have a different conversation, just because pass rush is king at the end of the day. As you said, it does set the baseline for the defense, and that's probably, I mean, I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but the biggest difference from this team personnel wise from 2023 to 2024 is just the depth of the defensive line. That was the theme that they wanted to get at building the team. They add John Franklin Myers. Benito takes a step forward. Allen takes a step forward, adding Malcolm Roach, DJ Jones returning as well. He was down for a couple seasons. I'm glad he's back. But a good point there about Patrick Surtain, and 2023 was up and down. Again, not an ideal scheme for him. I always made the joke of, like, when the Broncos were being mocked, Terrion Arnold last season at cornerback, and the Broncos defensive line was bad. I'm like, you have a Ferrari, but you're making him play off coverage because you can't get home with your pass rush. Like, what are we doing here? You can't even amplify your cornerback. But the one thing I want to get to here is you talk about Surtain not as good in 2023. In Broncos country, I think a lot of people, just because it's the offseason, everything's positive right now, they think, oh, we can replicate what happened in 2024 and build on that. I'm more conservative in nature in that front, and I want to see it again. Historically speaking, cornerback is unbelievably volatile. It's one reason that the peak is pretty short. Year to year, you don't know. You see a guy like AJ Terrell, it's like freaking roller coaster of how good they are out there. Speak to that volatility, and not that Surtain won't be the best cornerback in football next season, but just the reality that, he could fall from number 1 in the NFL to number 10 next season. Like if he has a little bit of a turf toe injury or something, just how that play can drop off and the volatility of the cornerback position in general.
Well, I think, again, his play is amplified by the fact that we are getting a lot of pressure. And so if that pressure were to fall off, or we don't have a historic year again, I think you see a little bit of a peel back. Really, what makes a great corner is that sustainability, that their line is a little flatter. Like you said, AJ Terrell, a lot of people think he's a talented guy. Tyson Campbell's another really good one, example of that for the Jaguars, who there's a lot of like hype behind them. But then when you look at the play, it's very volatile, and it could be volatile from week to week. And a lot of that goes back to both of those players have problems with the front end, right? Atlanta has been anemic at edge for, almost a decade. I couldn't even name you the last time they had a 10-sack person. So, and that's been one of those things. That was a big deal last year when they took the quarterback in the first round. It's like, man, you've got an edge sitting right there that you could take. So I think, to me, that's where that volatility comes. And so what the other thing that the Broncos are going to have to kind of really think about as well is, like, with Cooper and then with Benito, can you replicate the years that they both had? Benito's a little bit on the smaller side. Cooper, I think, has a little bit more sustainability just because of the way that he plays. So can you manufacture those one-on-ones again? I think the 5-man front structure is going to be really key. And then having that internal kind of rotation, right? Because I think Zach Allen last year played way too many snaps. They were so reliant on him. He was a monster inside, which really, look, I don't believe that he's Aaron Donald. I think Aaron Donald's like the only inside guy who just never quit, right? So it's like his motor was constantly going. I love Zach Allen. I just don't think he's at that level. So it's like they're going to have to manufacture a little bit more of a rotation and probably need to draft somebody who can come in and kind of feed that.
Man, you were speaking my language there. I've been banging I think you've retweeted a couple of times, like Zach Allen playing 15 more snaps like per game than any other interior defensive line in football is not a recipe for success. Now, give credit to him doing that at altitude. I mean, my goodness, whatever he talked about his condition. If anybody wants to join me in Connecticut in the winter, God bless, we can do our stuff up here. But
right.
Adding to the defensive line is something that intrigues me a lot. Again, it raises the floor and it gives you more options going forward. We do want to say hello to some folks in the chat. Again, Coach Cody Alexander is joining us today. Make sure you guys are following him on X, Twitter at @the_coach_A. Broncos fan, but more than that, just defensive mind and author of many good defensive books out there. You can find him on Amazon. David Youngkin's in the house. Good morning. I think adding Greenlaw and Hufanga to our young defense can learn a lot from these two. We're going to get back to that. I obviously want to ask Cody about that. Jason Bonney's in the house. Jeremy's saying it's finally draft month. Yes, it is. He also talks about adding tone setters. Come back to Greenlaw and Hufanga on that one. Jason Bonney talks about the defensive line. He said he finally got to Oregon defensive tackle Derek Harmon. Says he wants that dude. Speaking my language, will he be there at 20? I don't know. There's a lot of Bengals smoke there, but it is Lion season as well, so I'll believe it when I see it. Michael Ronquillo with the super chat. Good morning, Nick and Eric and Cody on Broncos for Breakfast. Go Bo Broncos. Thank you so much, Michael. We always appreciate Michael coming in. Lawrence Rivera. So Vance, his record speaks for itself, was never his problem, though just the players missing coverage and tackles. I mean, I think you can probably find there's a lot of Mile High Huddle content out there, but Cody joining us last year talking about the shift in scheme and personality last year, trying to mix and mash Ejiro Evero with Vance Joseph and then being like, well, this obviously isn't working, and right. Going to Vance Joseph. And we've kind of seen it here with also the twist that you mentioned, becoming one of the highest pressure-oriented teams on early downs in the NFL and really being a change-up from a lot of the league that way.
Yeah, that's going to be, I think if we're looking at, let's project forward to the season, I think the success that the Vikings have had the past 2 years, obviously the success of the Broncos, you can go and you can look at who is standing out, who's different. I think that right there is something to watch going into next season, how pressure heavy teams are willing to be on early downs. That's typically a base down. You just call base. Maybe you have some sort of a coverage rotation or a coverage disguise, but being able to blitz on an early down and then winning that early down is a boon for a defense. And I think that the Vikings and then also the Broncos have been able to prove that you can have a little bit of sustainability and a lot of success on defense doing that.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting too, because you think of a pressure-oriented defense, and I know your book is the title Cautious Aggression.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, okay. And being such a blitz-oriented team, my thought goes to, well, less bodies in coverage, more volatility. Is that something with the Broncos having somebody like Surtain back there and just as many one-on-one rushers that you don't get necessarily the same volatility? Because obviously Vic Fangio disciples everything is top down, getting the too high safety shell and eliminating explosive plays. But Broncos have kind of gone about it a different way to some success. What is the secret sauce there? Is it just getting those explosive drive killers on early downs that makes everything else fall in line? Or what is it?
Yeah, it's twofold. And I think so. We'll go back to the Vikings as a great example of this, is that it works early on, but can it people forget, man, the NFL is a very long season. And so what are you going to look like in week 18? And so you've seen the past 2 years, really the Vikings kind of defense kind of fall off at the end of the years. People kind of, the novelty wears off. People kind of figure it out. They look at other teams. I think the difference with Denver is the way that they were applying pressure. A lot of this was with a 5-man rush. And so they were able to kind of play coverage behind it, have Surtain lock up somebody that they needed to. The safety play was pretty decent for the most part. They got what they wanted out of that. So to me, I think that's where a little bit of that difference was. Whereas with the Vikings, that secondary kind of it fell off at the end, right? They weren't able to play a lot of man coverage, or they had to switch to playing more base defense, which then kind of takes out that kind of, we're going to line 7 guys up on the line. What are you going to do about it? So to me, it's kind kind of twofold. I think the Broncos is a little bit more sustainable just because of the roster that they have and then the scheme that they were doing it with. And so to me, that's where I think the trend in the NFL is going to be is, can you pressure on early downs, get them in a passing situation on second down, which then now you can get into some of these pressure packages and then kind of these disguised coverages and do some other things in the back end.
No, you've talked about how, the pressure up front really helps set up the coverage and everything. And I'm kind of curious because, we talk about Patrick Surtain a lot and you mentioned the safeties. I'm kind of curious about your thoughts on Riley Moss and Jaquan McMillan and what they were able to add to the coverage, the pressure up front again, helping them out. But what did they bring to the table to just help out the defense do as well as it did this last season?
Yeah, I think with Riley Moss is that you have a complement at corner. He can play relatively well on the outside. And then with McMillan, McMillan is really good slot receiver. A lot of times, especially in this type of a defense, when you're playing a lot of cover one, when you're playing a lot of match three, meaning that a lot of times, anytime you get two receivers out wide, the corner, even though we're in cover three, the corner and the nickel are going to be playing a lot of man coverage. The one thing Jaquan McMillan excels in is man coverage. So at Field Vision, where I'm the head of football operations, we had him as the 25th best corner in man coverage last year. When you can have a nickel that plays really well kind of in that man coverage aspect, that does a lot of things for you defensively. So when you have a guy like Surtain who's locking down one side, then we're able to, when we play our main coverage, which is, Broncos played a high volume of it along with three match, is that now we can match that up. I think Moss, the volatility in Moss, he's going to have to figure it out. I think that's got to be a concern for the Broncos, is just kind of his volatility in play. He's a little handsy. His hands, he likes to grab. A lot of times his eyes aren't in the right place, which leads to his hands being in the wrong feet. The eyes bring the hands bring the feet. So, it kind of all trickles down. When your eyes aren't right, your hands aren't going to be right. You're going to start grabbing, and then your feet obviously aren't right. I think that's going to be a concern. I wouldn't be surprised if a corner is taken in the first, at least maybe first 3 rounds, just because I don't think it'll be a first round pick, but I do think in the second or third, that's something to definitely look at, because you want to continuously add kind of bodies into that. I'm a big believer in the modern way of drafting, which is you draft edges and you draft corners. Every single year you draft an edge, you draft a corner, you probably are going to draft a receiver, and then you probably draft a running back every other year. Like that, you got to add into those rooms, especially because the depth of those rooms are so important. When you get a premium guy at one of the line positions, you take them, right? But when it comes to just how do you slot out your draft, you need to be drafting corners and you need to be drafting edges. And so I think they'll probably have somebody to come in and compete with Moss.
Yeah, and Moss was a hard evaluation because Iowa plays so much off coverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this zone out there, and Iowa's had a hard time. They've had a lot of good safeties and like slots come into the league from that Iowa pipeline of Phil Parker, but the boundary cornerback has been a graveyard, so to speak. So we'll see what happens with Moss. The other thing you mentioned, the volatility with Moss, is that he has been pretty much continuously injured. His time at Iowa, he missed multiple games. His first season in Denver, he missed a majority of the season. Last year, obviously had an injury and struggled when he came back. So adding to that volatility of the cornerback position, I think that Moss is good enough that if you didn't add somebody in the top 100 this season, especially with how I perceive this draft class specifically, I don't think you're going to get great value around 3 or 4 at the cornerback spot. Maybe you can find some nickels, but that's, again, not really helping with Moss. But it's something to keep an eye on for the season. And as you mentioned, if Moss is injured or takes a step back next season or doesn't improve, it could be potentially a fatal flaw on this team. We want to say hello to some more folks in here coming into the super chats. If you guys have any super chats for Coach Cody Alexander too, make sure you say so in the super. We got Colorado in here. Good morning to you. Hope you're doing well. Shiloh, good morning. Chase Wellner. We got Troy coming into the super, $9.99. He says, hope you have not already said, but what new things can we do with the free agency additions we could not do last year? We'll come back to that one, Troy, here in a second. Also, Coach Chris coming in. Good morning, everyone. The show's depth and information just keeps getting better and better. Well, when we can have guests on, like Coach Cody Alexander here, the depth can be better, and Eric and I can, sit back and just smile and shake our head. We've always loved the confirmation bias in here. That's what we've been saying. Good job. That's great. But coming back here to the generous super chat from Troy, the free agency additions. We'll get back to DJ Jones coming back. Obviously, how the linebacker market went before even legal tampering opened. It kind of changed the Broncos to seemingly circle back to bringing back DJ Jones. But everyone's excited. Dre Greenlaw to Denver from the 49ers. Talanoa Hufanga to the Broncos. You mentioned last season, or this offseason, positions the Broncos could add to the defense that could maybe take them to the next level, safety being one of them. And Talanoa Hufanga, gosh, that 2022 season, especially, talk about injuries again. The Broncos are really buying into their injury facilities here and putting their money where their mouth is. I think the sample size is too small to say oh, for sure they found the secret sauce. But man, these two guys, Broncos top 3, top 5 DVOA EPA per play last season. Now you have these two guys. What are you expecting with Talanoa Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw?
Yeah, Hufanga it fits this defense perfectly. He is a down safety, meaning he's going to play near the box. He can play some man coverage on a tight end, which is exactly what you want. It kind of unleashes Brandon Jones to kind of be that free player within the system to kind of do what he does well, which is play deep, kind of be an instinctual player, kind of, mess with the quarterback. I think that the key in both of these signings are going to be the health going forward. Hufanga is consistently injured. He's probably worth about 10 games, but then those other 7 are kind of hit or miss how many he's going to play. I think with Greenlaw, going back to before he started having these issues with his lower extremities, people forget about him because he played next to Fred Warner. But that 49ers linebacking core has been one of the most consistently good for really since both of those guys have started playing. Greenlaw does a really good job within the run stopping ability. So this, to me, what this signals to me is a lot more penny package stuff, 5-1. Being able to have him be able to plug an A gap and take the running back. Which kind of allows you to play some of that nickel stuff. Hufanga, again, you're not giving up a lot in the run game when he's able to play near the box. So again, I think a lot of these, that's kind of where we are in the NFL right now is when do you play nickel? When do you play base? And then how does that affect you? I think to me, where you can steal some downs is on some of these like 50-50 downs where we can play some of these nickel packages where we have 5 DBs on the field, but we're not giving anything up in the run game. I think also in a division that we are in where you have the Chargers who are trying to play, bully ball up front. Then you go and you look at the Raiders who have 2 really good young tight ends that can do multiple different things. You have a true Y and then a true F in Brock Bowers. And then you go and you look at the Chiefs who again have developed kind of their own true Y and a true F in Kelsey and Gray. So you have this constant polling on defenses in the division. You need to be able to play some of these nickel sets on downs where that typically, hey, they might run, they might not, these 50-50 downs. If we can steal it down on nickel and be able to get off the field when, hey, they run the ball and we're able to play that, I think that's where these 2 defenders particularly really help you out. It amplifies what you already have on the roster, but then it fixes some of these issues that you're going to have next year.
Now, I agree with a lot of that. I mean, they attacked both areas that the Broncos defense really needed after watching the linebacker play last year. Obviously, such a major thing that they needed to improve there. But DJ Jones being brought back, the minute he was signed, his teammates around him, they immediately took to Twitter praising it, being super ecstatic and super happy that he was brought back. What does DJ Jones bring? He's very viewed as a very quality run defender. And the Broncos last year, they seem to want to aimed at, he's our rundown interior guy. And then we have Malcolm Roach for passing downs. And then, so how much value is there in that as with the improvement at the linebacker position as well behind him? And how much value is there placed in keeping a guy that is so well liked at that position and that, got Zach Allen to praise it, John Franklin Myers, everybody around it, how he's a key guy for the locker room. So
and
how
just
important
adding to
is
that too, he coming back was a key instrument for bringing in Dre Greenlaw and Talanoa Hufanga as well. So you might have gone cheaper with Poona Ford or younger with Bobby Brown, but are you bringing those 2 former 49er guys as well? I mean, he was kind of the catalyst for that. So it's a crazy move and the downstream effect of that.
Yeah, I think if you go and you look at where we are in the ecosystem of the NFL right now, especially if you're going to play a five-man front, you talked about Bobby Brown. One of the issues with the Rams, though, even in that, was that they couldn't stop the run. So Bobby Brown's he is a nose, but he's kind of a lighter nose. He's more of kind of that hybrid nose. He can play on top of the center, but it's really he's not a plugger. I think with DJ Jones, what that does is it really cleans up your back end. So your second level, he's demanding a double team. He's good on these early downs. Those linebackers now can kind of read and react instead of necessarily have to go plug a gap right now. And I think too, that going back, when you have that familiarity with somebody and you can keep that camaraderie, a lot of times in free agency, we get overhyped with these guys. And look, we're kind of in the same boat here with Hufanga and Greenlaw. We have these kind of dreams and realities of what on paper, what this can look like, but you have to then project into it. What are they actually going to do for the defense? I think both of these free agents and then the addition of DJ Jones coming back, that fits what the Broncos want to do. I think a good example of this last year was like a Queen for the Steelers. He's a blitzing linebacker. He goes into a base 3-4 defense that doesn't blitz. They have 5 guys on the D line that want to get after the quarterback. Well, he didn't have that great of a year. So it's like that, but that was supposed to be one of the bigger signings last year. So again, when you project these free agent signings and you're looking at it, look at the roster within it. Hufanga fits the down safety. They play a lot of close post coverage in Denver. He's going to be down near the box. He can play a tight end. He can help fit the run. Okay. DJ Jones, it's going to clean up that run. We already know that they can insert, basically a quick 3 when they need to on passing downs, but he's going to keep Dre Greenlaw clean, who's an athletic linebacker. He's not a plugger. He's not, staying in the division. He's not like a Robert Spillbane, who's now going to the Patriots where, hey, he just plays in the A gap. That's what he does. He plays in the box. Like now you can see the path being woven within the way that they did this. And I like the fact that they went and they cleaned up that down safety position, because I like PJ Locke, but he's not really a down safety. He fits more like Brandon Jones. It really, what we had last year in the safety room, it wasn't that our safeties weren't good. Both of them actually played really well. It's just that you had one of them playing out of position at either time, because you're playing closed post. Both of them are kind of deeper safeties. But you got one's got to play down, right? So it's like you're putting them in positions where that's not where they excel. Now you get a guy like Hufanga. And two, again, it goes back to what I said with more nickel packages. Having a nose like DJ Jones, we're able to do that more on early downs, especially from that 5-man package.
Yeah, being able to play sub packages on early downs and not getting blown off the ball on early downs. Now, it was kind of an issue sometimes against the more dominant run offenses. We saw it against the Bills. The Broncos couldn't do, and I mean, Josh Allen statistically didn't have a great day, other than the few crazy highlight plays, right. But just down and down out, they couldn't stop the run. Kind of saw it also against the Ravens. Chargers beat them twice last season with the not a really exceptional running infrastructure, but I mean, Harbaugh ball beat Peyton ball on that one, despite the Broncos' good defensive front. So we'll come back to that here. I did want to get to a super chat here from Lawrence Rivera. I don't know where the Travis Hunter comments come from. It'd be awesome to get him in here, but he agrees that the Broncos need Travis Hunter. I think every team could need a Travis Hunter, but appreciate the super chat there, Lawrence. Hope you're doing well. Always appreciate you coming in and saying hello. Dun says Broncos for breakfast, best in the business. Yeah, we appreciate you coming in, Dun with all the hype. We're going to have to get wider angled cameras to get our heads fitting in here with comments like that. Goodness gracious. Quentin comes in, great call out for PJ Locke. Yeah, a lot of people assumed Broncos would be moving on from him after last season. Really bad game against the Bills on the whole, but he's a versatile, good piece to have as your third safety out there, and makes sense when you don't have an obvious filler in there. Hal's in here. Good morning, YouTube. Good morning to you, Hal. I see we got our guy Andy in here as well. He's asking about the Broncos bringing in a slot. He talks about Jahdae Barron, Texas. I know you're Texas guy at heart as well. Slot him in nickel, and our secondary is set. I know early on you had one of your tweets, I think I bookmarked it as well, mentioning that the nickel spot is an area the Broncos could possibly improve upon. Now, you do have the young, cost-controlled player in Jaquan McMillan, which I think it's like, if you could get a Cooper DeJean there, of course you'd love that. But you're okay with McMillan. But do you have any thoughts on Barron here from Andy, who does a good follow on Twitter as well?
Yeah, that's one of those positions where typically those guys, if you actually go and look at this, the past couple years, who have been kind of these guys like Drew Phillips with the Giants, Brian Branch with the Lions, these guys are going to be high in the second round, or they're going to be found in the second round because they are kind of usually going, they don't have the measurables, right? Like they're not like going to have these really high measurables where we're seeing, okay, this guy, I know he's going to go in the first round, but then we're going to put him at nickel. Usually that's not the way it works. Like Devin Witherspoon is another great example. This guy was a top 10 pick, and he can play outside corner. He's just also massive, and he doesn't mind tackling people, and so therefore he has this weird skill set. He's an alien. Like those guys like him and Kyle Hamilton are not fair, because to be like, oh, well, it'd be great. Well, yeah, it'd be great because you'd be, but then they're probably not going to, if we're going to the playoffs, they're probably not going to be where we're at. Like Kyle Hamilton falling to the middle of the first round was literally because he was a safety, and the safety is not a value position in the NFL right now. So to your point, if you can get a guy that drops that far, and you don't feel like let's say that there's not an interior defensive lineman there, or there's not even somebody on the offensive side that we really like, but the value position right there is somebody like a Barron, then I could see that. I could also see that, like I said at the beginning, in the second round or the third round, a corner is going to be taken. If it's a nickel, I don't think you're in a bad spot, because that is still the thing with McMillan. He's good at man coverage, but when he plays zone, he's not very good. So yeah, we can play a lot of match. We can play a lot of cover one, but what do we need to do when we need to play some of these other things? One of the trends in the NFL, and this is something that Vance Joseph is going to probably have to expand a little bit on. And we've seen guys that have been very man dominant. They usually have one really good year, and then the next year they kind of have to figure some things out. We see this with the Browns this year. Browns were dominant last year, best team, ran man coverage on almost 50% of their downs. We're killing people. This year, not the same. The pass rush wasn't there. The secondary kind of fell off after all. You have to have some sort of release. And when you do that all the time, the NFL's too good. So I do agree with you, going for a nickel, either in the second, maybe even trading up in the second round, or even getting one that you like in the second or the third. I think that's a good way to go if that guy is sitting there for you to take.
Yeah. And going off of that with, being able to upgrade potentially the nickel spot, if you're able to, is there anywhere else on this defense that it's like that if they can upgrade it, that would be great? Or is there anywhere that you see when you look at it that is still very much a position that they do need to go out there, target in the draft to upgrade at?
I do think you need to have another, and we've mentioned this before at the beginning of the show, you got to have another interior defensive lineman, and you need to have one that's kind of a premium guy. You need somebody, if you can have somebody, we already know DJ Jones can handle the nose position. We already have Zach Allen, who's an absolute beast. He played almost 1,000 snaps. Okay. The next closest interior defensive lineman was playing less than 500. So you need that rotational piece. If we think about his production this year, and then imagine if you could peel that back and he just played like 700 snaps, and imagine what that production would be. And then all you're doing is just adding maybe 400 snaps in between with a guy. So you don't have that pressure where you're drafting maybe a first or a high second round guy where he's got to come in and he's got to be the dude. Right now you can kind of rotate him in, which is what you want on the defensive line. I will say this too. I like Cooper and I like Benito, but I would like to see another edge in there as well. That kind of you want to constantly at that position have a rotation and have some sort of a competition going in. You don't want to get into a position unless you have a guy that's just like, hey, that's it. And then on the other side, we've got somebody. You want to be able to have some sort of a competition there.
Yeah, and to that point, you are again just speaking to me, Broncos country again. I don't want to accuse them of shiny object syndrome, right? Because like a running back at 20, like it'd be the running back room. We've harped on it all year last year. Like the offensive infrastructure is amazing already, especially for the run game. Running backs are not taking advantage of it. That's something that with this draft, I mean, it's obvious with the Broncos ownership meetings, like they're targeting a running back. Doesn't have to be at 20, but that's a position it's a must. It's their only remaining must have for building this team this offseason. But is it always the direction to go in the first round. When you're talking about like the deepest draft in probably 15 years of the position, you're going to be able to double up there as well. And it sounds like if you're going to take them at their face value, they like their guys there. They don't love them, but the guy's already in the room. But premium position wise, if it's not a good wide receiver class, defensive line adds up. And it's not just Allen playing an unbelievable amount of snaps where you are vulnerable not only to him like taking regression because of just the amount of snaps and stamina, but also injury for him. And that's such a huge part of the pie. It's kind of like the over reliance on Cortland Sutton in the pass game. Like if he goes, everything kind of tanks. But adding players to that defensive line, because good teams, especially with where the Broncos are at team building wise, they look a year ahead at where there's going to be a lot of potential turnover. Zach Allen, free agent. Malcolm Roach, free agent. Jonathan Franklin Myers, free agent. Nick Bonito, free agent. That's a huge problem for the Broncos. Now they have the richest owners in sports. Maybe they could Philadelphia Eagles it to an extent where it's, void year after void year kicked in there and bonuses that hit later that then they can put void years after that when they restructure it. But the Broncos probably need to get ahead there, not only because cutting into Allen's total snap count, but just setting the room up long term. So for this room, you have Roach and Jones, of course, your one technique, zero, whatever you want the nose tackles. You got your 4-eye body types in Allen and John Franklin Myers. Is there any specific archetype that you're looking for, a role you're looking for? Or is it really just, adding another body in there in general? Or are you looking for somebody like those guys to replace them, or somebody who even blurs the lines? I mean, is there a specific kind of guy on that interior that would be great? And sorry if you hear any banging. My 15-year-old must be up and is tossing around dog toys above me here. So I apologize.
No, I think that's one of the things that this team is going to need is I don't think, nose is one of those you don't typically going to go up and get a guy in the first round unless he's kind of a dynamic guy. I think, for me, the Mason Graham kid is kind of that. He reminds me a lot of like Harrison Phillips with the Vikings, where, he's just kind of a mauler inside. He can add a little bit in the pass rush, but he's really a nose, but he's really, really good at it. And so he's probably going to go relatively high. I think as you get down to where we are in the 20s, a guy like Kenneth Grant, who reminds me of like a Dalvin Tomlinson, he's not necessarily a quick three. To me, that's the other thing too. When you play a 5-man front, as much as the Broncos do, you don't need necessarily a premium pass rusher. You don't need a quick three. Like you don't need a Chris Jones from like the Chiefs. Like you don't need a guy like that. You need somebody who can maybe get you 5 to 6 sacks is a problem, but is really creating one-on-ones for those edges. So to me, sitting there at 20, somebody like a Kenneth Grant would be really good. I also think maybe even like a Walter Nolan from Mississippi, if you want to reach up or maybe even trade down a little bit, you can get to kind of get another second round pick. I think he might be somebody. He reminds me of like what Milton Williams was able to do for the Eagles. So I think the other one there too is a Derek Harmon. Now, the only thing with Derek Harmon, he reminds me of like a Javon Kinlaw. The only issue there is like, can you sustain in the run game? But the little asterisk there is if you're only needing a rotational piece in year one, where you can develop a little bit more physicality in terms of hand placement, playing the run, doing some more of the technical pieces, I think he's somebody to look for as a kind of somebody that like fits the mold of that rotational piece. So going through kind of those D-line guys in that first round, those are some of the pieces and how they could fit within the Broncos.
Yeah. And so going over to edge with it, because you mentioned, Bonito and the status there, and then Nick mentioned his contract status, and then Jonathan Cooper, Jonah Ellis and DeAndre Tillman, they played fine last year. Jonah Ellis was one of the, better rookie pass rushers in the season last year. But you also mentioned still being able to upgrade it. So is there anybody in the first round or archetype that stands out for the edge position with what they need? Because when I go back and watch the Bills game, for me, it looks like they need somebody who can help set an edge a little bit better, because that is where they absolutely got washed out at with Bonito and Cooper out there on the field as often as they are.
And to be fair, Spencer Brown is a freaking alien out there at right tackle. So that's might be one of the best right tackles in football. So, but yeah, you're right. Sorry, I just wanted a Spencer Brown highlight tape there. That was unbelievable.
No, he looks fake. I mean, some of these guys look like the way that they're built. They just look like normal human beings stretched to these unbelievable sizes. That's typically how you know somebody is going to be an offensive lineman or not. Is that those guys? I don't think people understand. Those are not sloppy bodies out there. Those guys are freaks.
Frankenstein.
Yeah, I think some guys to think about would be like a Mikael Williams from Georgia. He reminds me of like a Montez Sweat. I know Montez Sweat plays in a 4-down, and it really did with the Commanders and the Bears. But he can drop a little bit. Bears did a little bit more simulated pressures this year. That could be somebody if they fall down. I think you got to stay away. If you need more of a kind of a power edge, you got to be careful. The other thing that I like about the Broncos that kind of unlocks them a little bit is that you don't have to have a guy that's really good in coverage. So you don't need some of these hybrid guys like a Jalen Walker or even the kid from Boston College. I don't want to butcher his name, that are more or less kind of these like they're stand-up edges. Like James Pierce. James Pierce from Tennessee reminds me of Nick Medino when you look at kind of what he adds. So like adding him could be hey, look, we got a guy like Nick Benito. If we could add another guy like that in the first round. But if you're looking more in that sense, I think that you got to really be careful going after some of these guys that are a little bit on kind of that lower side. Mike Green from Marshall might be another one to look at that kind of fits the mold of what the Broncos are looking for.
And I did want to ask you, coming back around to it, the Broncos have apparently looked for an archetype of some people use tweener. I'm going to take a page out of Lance Zierlein's book and instead use hybrid player on the front. So you mentioned Jalen Walker maybe not being a fit, but there's kind of some questions about his exact role. And given the Broncos staff, they've really loved this second level hybrid type of pass rusher. I mean, Vance Joseph, it hasn't always worked, but you know what he figured out with Hassan Reddick out there. I think they took Zaven Collins as well, who's kind of morphed in that player. And then, gosh, I mean, you're a college guy as much as NFL, but what Jim Leonard did with the Wisconsin Badgers, I mean, you can just go through the list. It's an unbelievable amount of these hybrid edge / off ball type of players. Van Ginkel, of course, Zach Bond, we just saw what he got paid. So I'm curious about Jalen Walker / Jihad Campbell in kind of a early down stack linebacker position and then being a pressure weapon. It's something that when the Broncos drafted Drew Sanders in the post-draft press conference, Sean Payton talked about adding pressure players from the linebacker spot as well. So it's obviously something that interests them. And we kind of saw it last year with Edgerrin Cooper, Frankie Louvu. You mentioned Patrick Queen in that role as well. So replacing Alex Singleton long-term, but last year of his contract going to be 32, 33 coming off an injury. They have Drew Sanders. I've heard mixed reports on the long-term viability at the off ball for him. But thoughts on a Walker or Jihad Campbell at pick 20 and adding a totally different skill set, but something that it seems like they would be interested in to pair next to Greenlaw up front.
Yeah, and so going with trends, I think that is now the trend. If you can get a guy like, a Greenlaw who can handle the box, then you can pair him with somebody that's that hybrid edge. And so what it allows you to do a lot of times is instead of running a 5-man front, now we can run our 4-down nickel package, but we can get into a 5-man front. I can move one of these guys inside. Now I can walk down one of these hybrid off-ball edge guys. I think Frankie Louvu is pretty much the archetype of what everybody's kind of looking for. I think Zach Bond is another one, except for he's just not that much of an edge rusher. He can hold up in the run game on that. So I think that's the pairing that I think a lot of guys and a lot of NFL teams are trying to look for. If you don't think that Sanders is going to be that guy going forward, which again, you look at that, he was drafted in 23. Again, he's one of those, he reminds me of Browning. They couldn't figure out what he was going to play. Could he play edge? I think even at Arkansas, they couldn't really figure out what they wanted him to do. Sometimes guys, you get that, but then they are a jack of all trades and a master of none, and you can't figure out where they are. So, if you can get a guy, and I think it also helps coming from a system that both of those guys, Alabama and Georgia, are coming from, that they are doing a lot of diverse things from that off ball. They are, as an edge rusher, they are blitzing from off ball. They're playing in coverage. They understand where they need to fit within a vast amount of coverages. I do think that guys like that have a little bit more success than the typical off-ball guys that have come in from that program where, look, they just blitz and they can't really read and react and do some of these other things. So I do think if they're there and it's one of those where they just want to take the best player available, I think you do, because again, you're kind of getting a 2-for-1. You're getting an insurance policy for Alex Singleton, but then also, or Greenlaw.
Yeah.
But then also you're adding value and adding a rotational piece into that edge room without necessarily going and getting an edge.
Yeah, it's something that I've been, playing with as well. I do a mock draft every week, and I added Jalen Walker last week, and I'm like, well, maybe like worst case, you think in the Hassan Reddick pathway there, who, Temple off ball, but found a home at edge. But with the way the defense is set up, pairing somebody who's more downhill blitz centric, if you want to do sim pressures from the linebacker spot, if they have questions about Greenlaw's playbook aptitude or processing, then adding somebody like that at 20 is an interesting fit and something that Broncos country hasn't talked about so much. The last spot I want to ask you talked about the Broncos now having the safety room being pretty set. You're excited about Hufanga, again, injury questions, Brandon Jones, but sitting there at 20, it's possible that the BPA on the board is either Malachi Starks, who was a perennial top 10 kind of guy, had a down year this season, didn't test exceptional. I think that's maybe a little bit overrated for safety, taking a little bit from the Kyle Hamilton stuff. The GPS numbers were all top of everybody at the combine. And then Nick Manawari, who is just an absolute freak athlete. So we saw it last season. You mentioned the penny front earlier as well, but Denver also trying to go maybe some 3 safety looks. How viable would that be for you for Vance Joseph and the Broncos, either getting the more free safety matchup type like Malachi Starks or a Nick Manawari who blurs the line between safety and will linebacker?
Yeah, to me, I think they're two little bit different players. Like, to me, Malachi Starks is a lot like a Kirby Joseph. So this would be somebody, if you got him, you probably put Hufanga in that big nickel position, which if that's something that you want to do, that's another way of staying in a sub package, but not giving up a lot in the run game. He already plays down near the box most of the time. So him being a overhang at safety is not that different than being an overhang at the big nickel position. So if that's something that they want to add in, I think that that's a possibility. It also allows you, again, if you take, let's say Starks is there, that now gives you kind of these 2 deep safeties, but then somebody that is a rotational piece as well. I think that, I don't think you can go wrong there. I think with the kid from South Carolina, you need to have a plan. To me, this is Jeremy Chin, right? Like, they're almost the identical size. I think with me looking at him, again, you've got to have a plan, because if you got to make sure too that he can play the back. We saw this with the Patriots with Duggar as well. You kind of get this one. You can have some sustained success if you move him around, but if you try and leave him back, he doesn't have, Chin kind of wore out a little bit. With the Commanders, they had to essentially just keep him near the box towards the end of the season just because of the coverage ability. So that's going to be the question there. You can get, Joseph has had this now with 2 guys. He had Isaiah Simmons, and then he also had Zaven Collins. So I think hopefully you get a guy like this on paper, it looks really good. And what it could be, but then you need to project forward. Can he actually do it? Isaiah Simmons was essentially always going to be that kind of really big, almost like a Sam linebacker type. Even if you go back to college, he just really struggled in coverage. He was more of a blitzer. Then you go to a guy like Jeremy Chin, who is a down safety. He's going to fit. So to me, you got Hufanga. If you draft him, you're basically drafting him as an insurance policy in case something happens to Hufanga, and hope that he can play at that position. Whereas I think, like, if you go with a guy like Starks, you now have kind of that hybrid safety type that can play match coverage, and when he's in down, he can fit the box if you need to, but then he can also play that deeper position. So I think he would probably be a little bit better of a fit. I just get a little bit worried with some of these bigger guys that aren't Kyle Hamilton, that Kyle Hamilton played off like back in coverage. Like there were so many snaps of him playing actual safety that you kind of have like, okay, this projects. And not that the South Carolina kid is really good. You got to have a plan for that position.
Yeah, that's a great call. And we got Quentin saying, great to have Coach Cody on the pod. Yeah, thank you so much. We got a few more questions here, and then we're going to wrap it on up. So if you guys have anything for Coach Chris, make sure to get your super chats in and click a thumbs up on the way out. Again, Coach is on X, Twitter at _coach_A. Eric, some more thoughts?
Yeah, so we've talked about the viability to add, in the first round to all these positions on defense. When you look at the Broncos roster, how would you order them with, of importance to add in that first round?
Yeah, I think interior defensive line. I think you take the best interior defensive lineman that's available, and then edge is probably the second one there. You gotta add to that line. I think you're gonna be okay if you take a corner in the second round, whether it's an outside corner or whether it's or even a safety, whether it's a true safety or a nickel. It's outside corner or a nickel. I think you're gonna be fine there. But in terms of priority, I think that those would be it. If you can get a guy that's a hybrid linebacker, the only issue is as you go, those two that are in the first round, that's kind of like the premium guys. Once you get out of that, we're looking at pretty much box linebackers. So, and that's why obviously the hybrid type is why they're in the first round. So I think to me, that would be the order of it. If you take the top interior guy that you can find, so you can give Allen a little bit of a breather. And then if you can, or if there's an edge and your top interior guy's gone, go ahead and take that edge.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, it's not just, the long-term viability. It's a heavily rotational position as well. I mean, the Broncos last season, what they did, they didn't really have – I mean, Allen, I guess you can call a 1A, but at edge, not a lot of all-pros. A lot of guys, I wish we had a little bit more time. I'd ask you about the long-term viability of Benito and his contract. In fact, we do have a second here. Benito played in this obvious early down, blitz-centric defense, some of the most one-on-ones in football. Sounds like he's going to be looking for 25 to 27 million a season. I think there was a statistic floating out there that he had 7 garbage time sacks last season. I think the next highest was 4. So a lot of like game win probability already on the ends of the spectrum there. What do you think about Benito as paying him as a 1A top 5, top 10 pass rusher, or is it more so he's in the perfect scheme and fit for him situationally that maybe amplifies his statistical output a little bit? Obviously a very good player, but maybe not a scheme versatile multiple player all the same.
I think the issue that you're going to run with him is this: he gives you nothing in the run defense. And so unless he's just running up the field on passing downs, I think it's going to be really hard for the Broncos to sit there and say, do we give him $20 million and he's really just a pass rush guy, even though he is relatively good at dropping into coverage. So again, if Vance Joseph is going to be your answer at defensive coordinator, which I think we all see that's what it is. I mean, Peyton has stuck with them through what we saw in 23. He had a really good year in 24. I don't see a huge fall off on the defense this year, though. Joseph has had that happen. I just don't see them moving on. So do you get a guy who's really a pass rush specialist and in coverage? He's essentially a hybrid edge, doesn't add anything in the run game. Is that fitting the defense? And I think for $20 million, that probably doesn't fit. And you could probably get something in probably the second or the third round, maybe even the fourth round that could add there. Or you go out in free agency next year and go get a guy that you really feel comfortable with in that position. But looking at our Field Vision Havoc ratings, he was the 28th best edge last year. He was 15th in pass rush. He was 125th in run defense. Okay. And he was 5th in coverage, which again, he's dropping into coverage where he's taking a running back a lot of the time in this man-centric defense. So to me, I think you look at it a little bit deeper. Let's scratch the surface. The sacks are sexy. The flash plays are sexy, but does he add value to the defense at a $20 million? I think if you can get him at, a little bit over a 10 million, you bring him back. Because he's a rotational piece. Even if you find a guy that you like, they could stay there, kind of an every down player. So to me, I think someone will probably, if he has another big year sack wise, somebody will probably give him some money. I just would be hesitant in this defense at just bringing in a guy that's a specialist.
Yeah, to me, his archetype was Bruce Irvin coming in. That kind of hybrid guy. And if you want to really multiply the defense at the edge room, getting somebody who's a little bit more hybrid from 7 technique early down, maybe rotating down to 4-eye, like a Shamar Stewart, like a Michael Williams, to take some of that early down rundown load off of Benito and letting him even become a more versatile piece. Maybe some mug looks from him. I don't know. That would be something that would be interesting to me on the defense. We got a couple minutes left. Eric, any final thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna go and kind of ask you a similar question about John Franklin Myers with an extension, and with what he brings and what he's looking at, because we saw some of these defensive line contracts, Milton Williams getting 27 on an annual basis, and there's been, Zach Allen, his rumor number is set to be 25 plus, and he's almost a no-brainer to go get and go extend. And plus, with the way they structured his contract and restructured with the void years, they basically have to get an extension done with him. But with John Franklin Myers, it's a little bit more, up in the air of his importance and where it is, what's the number you bring him back at. And then a second part of that is, would you be willing to kind of kick the can down the road to next year on both Benito and John Franklin Myers, seeing if they're both able to, replicate what they did this last season, with John Franklin Myers and Benito both having career years?
Yeah, I would even just take a pause on Franklin Myers. Franklin Myers is a big 5. So he's a defensive end, maybe but in the 3-4, he's really a big 5. If you go and you look at where he mostly played right over top of the tackles. So he's looking at you're looking at I call it a big 5 because he's essentially playing right on top of the tackle, the outside. He's technically a defensive end, but he's really an interior defensive lineman. I think too with him, again, this is your quick 3, right? This is a guy that can play. He had 7 sacks last year. I think that you've got to really be careful with these guys where they've kind of been journeymen in their career. They have one good season because you kind of have you're manufacturing a lot of these one-on-ones. He's winning them. But he's not necessarily a dominant player. So I think when you look at, you got to take sacks into account. One, when are they happening? Like you made the great point of Benito. A lot of these are just in junk time when they knew that pass was coming. Or are they coming in situations where, like Franklin Myers, we're in a 5-man front. It's a passing down. He's winning his one-on-ones. He had 7 sacks. You're kind of manufacturing those. What's going to happen when you can't necessarily manufacture those anymore, or we're putting him in situations? You give him money, a big extension. You're asking him then to essentially play on every down. And so if we're going to pay you as an every down player, then I need you to play as an every down player. I mean, he played 500 snaps last year. I think that if he's one that if he can have another year, he really fits that system and he fits that big 5. I would rather extend a John Franklin Myers than I would necessarily extend somebody like Benito, who is essentially a kind of a pass rush specialist or a third down specialist. He can rush a passer and he can play a little bit of coverage when we ask him to play right there in the seam or to take the running back. I think you can go find another guy like that, but a John Franklin Myers, if we can get him to another 6 to 7 sacks, I think you go ahead and extend him instead of Benito. I think you build inside out. I think again, like I go back, you cycle through your edges and you cycle through your corners. If you get a guy like a Pat Surtain, you pay him. If you get a guy like Jonathan Cooper, who's really good against the run and really good against the pass, you pay him. So I think that's kind of where you got to look at it.
Interesting all around. Final question. Thank you so much for your time today, Cody. Expectations for 2025 defense. Is this going to be the best defense in the NFL next season, or are you expecting some regression? I don't fully expect them to break the all-time Broncos franchise sack record again, but keeping pretty much the band back together. Granted, a lot of guys older. What is the overall outlook for 2025?
I think you're going to see them sit right there in that top 10. I think Joseph has the guys that he needs to perform. I'm a little bit worried about the corner spot, McMillan playing in the nickel. If we can that to me, that volatility there is a little bit worrisome. I do think Surtain is in the best possible situation that you can be in. I like where we are at with the front. I think both of your edges give you something, especially Cooper. So to me, I don't see a ton of regression. It's really hard to be the top defense year in and year out. I think do we land somewhere between that 5 and 7 area? I think if there's just a slight regression, that's where we are, because I definitely agree. If the free agents stay healthy, I think that this is a defense that can cause a lot of problems for people.
Well, thank you so much for all your time and these questions here. Educating Broncos country. It's been a running back Joker-centric offseason. The Broncos following, the talk of Sean Payton, but I'm a defensive guy at heart. I mean, gosh, Iowa Hawkeye football. If I'm not, then I'm going to have a hard time. But also special teams, of course. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you guys are following all of us on Twitter. Of course, we got, let me see right here, Coach Cody Alexander, _coach_A over on X. We appreciate that. Also follow Eric and I on Twitter. I'm at Nick Kendall, MHH. Eric's at Eric Trickle. We also have, of course, at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, we're over at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Mile High Huddle Pod. And as the ticker says there underneath, please subscribe, like, and share. Coach, any final thoughts? Where can everybody find you outside of Twitter? You have the Substack, books. What's going on?
Yeah, best place to find everything. If you liked anything that I talked about and you want to dig into defense a little bit more, especially the NFL level, and then I obviously cover a lot of major college football, just go to matchquarters.com. There's links to everything that you could possibly need, books, where I'm at on socials, Match Quarters on pretty much every other social other than X. So you can find everything you need at matchquarters.com.
Yeah, and everybody's appreciating the chat. Thank you so much for your time. Obviously, your defense first, but it's fun to have you joining us for your favorite Broncos team and how much things have turned around. I mean, I know that you, along with us, were very skeptical of what this Broncos defense could be a year ago. And, man, it shows you how quickly the NFL, not for long. And we're right in the thick of things. So really excited to see what happens this season for the Broncos and what they do in the draft. Pretty much everything is on the table with pick 20 overall. Again, make sure you guys are following Coach Cody Alexander and everything. We really do appreciate the time. Excellent insight, giving Eric and I some things to think about going forward. You have a great rest of your time. Good luck with the 3 kids as well. Hopefully they're giving you your time to film study and everything. I know that I'm pretty much on the computer before he wakes up and after he goes down trying to get everything done. But hope you're doing well. Keep up doing what you're doing. And again, really, really do appreciate your time coming on here and sharing your insights.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Anytime to talk ball and talk Broncos, I'm here. Appreciate you.
All right. Well, thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again on Monday. Continue to choose kindness and compassion. As I always say, go Broncos.